Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today, we're looking at something that I think is going to be really interesting and relevant to, a lot of our listeners. It's the connection between your personal skills, what you bring to the table, and your ambition as an entrepreneur, how much you want to grow your business,
Yeah.
how big you want to go.
This is something that's really fascinated me too. And we've got this research article that we're diving into today called Human Capital, Institutions, and Ambitious Entrepreneurship During Good Times and Two Crises.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a long title, but
But you know what? Even though that title sounds a bit dry, kind of academic-y,
yeah,
the findings are anything but BT. Trust me.
absolutely. It really challenges a lot of the assumptions that people have
Yeah.
about what it takes to make it as an entrepreneur. And the coolest thing is that this research uses data from a massive global survey. It's called the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's huge. We're talking 93 countries, 16 years of data, over 140,000 entrepreneurs.
Wow, 140,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot of data.
That's a really big sample size.
Yeah. Okay, so with all of that information, what are we focusing on in this deep dive?
Well, today we're going to really zero in on how the skills that you have, the things that you bring to the table as an entrepreneur, what you learn in school versus what you learn through experience. How all of that can actually play out differently depending on the type of economy that you're in.
Oh, interesting. So where you are in the world really matters.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So specifically today, we're going to be looking at these things called pro-market economies.
Okay, so that's a term I've heard before, but I don't know if I could give you like a clear definition.
Yeah, I think it gets thrown around a lot, but it's one of those things where people aren't always sure what it actually means.
Exactly. So before we get too deep into the research, can we just break down what a pro-market economy actually is? Like, what are the defining features?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, pro-market systems are designed to reduce a lot of the barriers to doing business, and they try to make it easier. Less regulation, more emphasis on free exchange.
So I guess it's like if you think about it like a spectrum.
Yeah.
On one end, you've got a system that's, super regulated, lots of rules, lots of hoops to jump through. And then on the other end, you've got this pro-market system where things are much more open and free-flowing.
Right. It's kind of like comparing a well-worn path versus a dense jungle.
Yeah, exactly.
One's going to be a lot easier to navigate,
Right.
but the other might have like hidden treasures if you know where to look.
Exactly. Like you might need a guide.
Yeah.
You might need some more, experience to really thrive in that jungle.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to one of the most interesting findings from this research. So you might think that in a pro-market system, where things are a bit more freewheeling, that having a lot of formal education, degrees, diplomas, all that good stuff
Yeah.
would automatically give you an advantage.
Yeah, that seems logical, right?
You would think so.
Yeah.
But what they found is that it's not always the case. It's not as straightforward as you might think.
Oh, really? So all those years I spent getting my MBA, maybe it's not the golden ticket that I thought it was.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
It's not to say that education isn't valuable,
Right?
because it absolutely is.
Yeah.
It gives you a foundation of knowledge and theory that's really important. But in a fast-paced environment that's not as regulated, your ability to adapt and learn quickly on the fly, that becomes even more important.
So it's like, yeah, knowing all of the theory from a textbook is great, but you've also got to be able to think on your feet and react to changes in the market in real time.
Exactly. And that's where this other type of skill comes in. It's what the researchers call specific human capital.
Okay, so what is that? How's that different from general human capital?
So general human capital is more that formal education side of things, whereas specific human capital is all about the experience that you get by actually being out there in the marketplace, starting a business, investing in someone else's venture, just learning the ropes of your industry, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so it's more like hands-on practical knowledge,
Exactly.
not just book smarts.
Right. And that kind of knowledge is harder to get from a textbook.
Makes sense. So pro-market economies seem to really value that real-world experience. But why is that?
One of the key things about pro-market systems is that they're typically less predictable. They're constantly evolving and changing. There are always new challenges and opportunities popping up. So to really thrive in that kind of environment, you need more than just that solid foundation of knowledge.
Yeah.
You need to be able to think on your feet, make decisions quickly,
Yeah.
and be ready to adjust your course,
Yeah.
based on what the market's telling you.
So it's kind of like being a surfer.
Yeah.
You need to be able to read the waves and adjust your approach based on, the conditions that day.
Exactly. You've got to be able to adapt.
You got to be adaptable.
Yeah.
Okay, so pro-market systems, less predictable and more adaptable.
Right.
Got it.
And that's where specific human capital really shines.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm starting to see how these pieces fit together. Now, I'm curious to see how this all plays out during those times of crisis. You mentioned, like the 2008 financial crisis and the pandemic.
Yeah, that's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay. So should we dive into that now?
Let's do it. Okay, so we were talking about how pro-market systems, they really reward that ability to adapt and pivot.
Yeah.
Things change quickly.
Right. It's not like a slow-moving, kind of predictable market.
Right, exactly. And so this research actually dug into how this all played out during two major crises that really shook things up globally.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about like the 2008 financial crisis.
Exactly.
And then more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Huge disruptions.
Yeah, those are some really intense times. I mean, I can only imagine how much pressure those crises put on entrepreneurs.
Oh, absolutely. It was a real trial by fire. And, when they looked at the data, they found something pretty fascinating. Across both of those crises, entrepreneurs who had more of that specific human capital that we were talking about, that hands-on experience, they tended to have much higher growth aspirations.
Oh, so even when everything's going crazy, the people with that practical experience, they were still like, yeah, we're going for it. We're going to grow this business.
Exactly. They were more likely to be like, okay, things are tough, but we're going to find a way to make this work and come out stronger on the other side.
That's so interesting. It's like that saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Right. But it's not just about being tough.
Right. You've got to have the skills to back it up.
Exactly. It's about being resourceful, knowing how to pivot when things go sideways, and maybe even being able to spot opportunities that other people miss. And those skills, those instincts often come from having that real-world experience, from having been in the trenches before.
Yeah, I'm starting to see why that specific human capital is so valuable, especially in a pro-market system where things are already moving fast and then you add a crisis on top of that.
Right. It's like a whole other level of intensity. But those who can handle it, they can really come out ahead.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the benefits of that specific human capital. But what about people like me who, went the more traditional route and invested a lot of time and money in getting a formal education?
Yeah.
Like, does this research suggest that formal education becomes less valuable in a pro-market system, especially during a crisis?
It's not that one is necessarily better than the other.
Okay.
It's more about understanding how they work together.
Okay.
Like you said, formal education, it gives you that really crucial foundation of knowledge. But it's that real-world experience that helps you apply it effectively in an environment that's unpredictable and constantly changing.
I see what you're saying. So it's like having a toolbox full of really high-quality tools.
Yeah.
That's great. But if you don't know how to use them,
right,
they're not going to do you much good when you're faced with a really complex repair job.
Exactly. You need both the tools and the know-how.
Right. The knowledge and the skills.
Right. And, this research actually found a really interesting nuance about how the value of different types of experience can shift depending on the specific crisis that's happening.
Oh, really? So like 2008 versus the pandemic might have favored different skill sets.
Exactly. Like, for example, during the 2008 financial crisis, they found that entrepreneurs who had investment experience, they had a real advantage.
Oh, why is that?
So think about it. Back then, access to capital was like the biggest hurdle.
Right, because banks were basically frozen.
Right.
Nobody was lending money.
Exactly. So those who had experience navigating the investment world, they knew how to tap into different networks, find creative solutions and keep those funds flowing.
So it's like they knew the back roads and the shortcuts.
Yeah.
When the main highway was completely shut down.
Exactly. They could find a way around the roadblocks.
That's really interesting. So investment experience was key in 2008. But then what about during the pandemic?
Well, during COVID, things were a little different. Remember, governments around the world stepped in with huge relief packages and support programs.
Oh, right. Trying to keep businesses afloat.
Exactly. So access to private capital wasn't as much of a bottleneck.
Okay. So it wasn't all about the money this time.
Right. This time, the focus shifted more towards operational efficiency. Those who knew how to run a lean, adaptable business manage, remote teams navigate supply chain disruptions. Those were the ones who really thrived.
So different crises call for different skill sets.
Exactly. And being able to anticipate those shifts.
Yeah.
That's a huge advantage.
It's almost like you need a crystal ball.
Kind of.
Yeah.
But really, it comes down to staying informed and being flexible.
Right. Okay, so I think I'm getting the big picture here.
Yeah,
It's not just about acquiring knowledge and skills. It's about understanding the context that you're operating in and constantly assessing how those skills align with the challenges and opportunities that are popping up all the time.
exactly. You got to stay on top of things.
And be ready to adapt.
Precisely. That's the key takeaway here for anyone who's either in the entrepreneurial game already or thinking about taking the leap.
It sounds like being able to adapt is so important no matter what, but especially in those less regulated, more pro-market systems where things are just constantly changing.
Oh, for sure. And it makes you wonder, this research we've been talking about, it focuses on those early stage businesses, the startups, the ones who are just getting going.
Mm.
But do you think that dynamic changes as a company grows and matures?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, my gut tells me that maybe as a company gets bigger, that balance of skills needed might start to shift a little bit, maybe back towards that formal education side of things.
Oh, how so?
Well, I'm just thinking, when you're dealing with a large organization,
Mm.
all the complexities that come with that, maybe navigating regulations, making strategic decisions on a much larger scale, maybe those kinds of things require more of that theoretical knowledge that you get from,
Yeah.
those advanced degrees.
That's a really good point. Or maybe it's not even so much about going back to formal education, but more like an evolution of what specific human capital actually means in the context of a larger company.
So, like, instead of just having experience launching a startup, now you need experience scaling a company,
Right.
building and managing teams,
Exactly.
maybe even navigating international markets.
Yeah, it could be that the specific skills that are highly valued in a larger, more established company are totally different from those that are crucial in those early, scrappy startup days.
It's almost like leveling up in a video game,
Yeah.
As you progress, the challenges get more complex and you need to acquire new skills and knowledge to overcome them.
I love that analogy.
Hmm.
And it highlights something really important for all of us, whether we're just starting out on our entrepreneurial journey or we're, leading a well-established company. Learning never stops.
So true.
The economic landscape is constantly changing, and understanding those shifts can give us a real advantage.
No. Absolutely. Well, I think we've covered a ton of ground today. We explored how those pro-market systems can create this really interesting dynamic where hands-on experience is just as valuable as formal education, if not more so. And we saw how different types of crises can actually change the equation, making certain skills more important than others at different times.
Yeah, the key takeaway here is to be aware of the context that you're operating in, to be constantly learning and adapting, and to never underestimate the power of combining your theoretical knowledge with real-world experience. I think that's the real recipe for success.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Mhm.
So on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. I hope this conversation has given everyone some food for thought. As you navigate your own entrepreneurial path, just remember, no matter where you are on that journey, there's always something new to learn and discover.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring and keep pushing those boundaries.
Happy learning, everyone.